President of Lifeflip Media, Eric Mitchell, and host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast, Chris Hahn, joining me right now. Okay, Eric, I got to start with you. I was on Twitter yesterday, and I saw a post that you made that said Ohio should declare itself part of Ukraine so that it actually starts getting aid. Why have you been so vocal about it, and do you think that a lot of people agree with you?
I think the problem has been, Adrienne, since the start of this on February 3rd, it's just the EPA and the government taking this high road of everything's safe, everything's wonderful. And the simple thing is drink the water. Get the governor of Ohio to drink this water. They claim to be safe for the city. And why has it taken 3 weeks for a clinic to open? This happened February 3rd. To me, it's frustrating that everything is slow. And it's just a coinky-dink that Friday is the same day that former President Trump announced he's going to come visit tomorrow. All of a sudden, all this aid started showing up. But again, all these officials are showing up there and not really doing anything. And they're, way too late to the show. It's like this should be an immediate response. Yes, there's only 6,000 people in East Palestine, Ohio, but those are Americans. And that's the first priority. And as somebody who served our country, I don't understand why my president is over in Ukraine giving away billions of dollars. And to quote the congressman who's also a veteran, Eli Crane, this is taking away from our supplies that we have for our own ammunition, for things that we have to do because we are going up against Russia and China, who we all know about balloons and UFOs. So this is very frustrating, and I know I see it around social media. To me, it just drives me nuts to see back home not taken care of first.
There are a lot of lawmakers. We mentioned earlier Marjorie Taylor Greene making some inflammatory statements on social media. It certainly gets people's attention, but is it useful? Chris, does Eric and people who think like Eric have a point here? And I mean, you think about not just the situation in East Palestine, but the fact that there are people in Florida following Hurricane Ian who still haven't received payments from FEMA after that disaster. There are still people in Kentucky where that flooding from last July has just devastated a community. They're out of their homes. Does Eric and again, people who agree with him have a point here?
Well, first, having worked in local government myself, I understand the frustration that the mayor is feeling, and he is perfectly right to feel that frustration. But the United States government is vast and large, and the money we're sending to Ukraine is necessary to preserve democracy in Europe. This is a threat from a foreign power who is our greatest adversary militarily on the world stage. But the president going to Ukraine is sending a message not only to Russia, and to our allies in Europe, but to the Chinese who are considering giving lethal aid to the Russians. But yes, the federal government can and should be doing more in East Palestine. They should be doing everything they can to restore the confidence in the people there, relocating them if necessary, which I think will. And when former President Trump, goes to East Palestine on Friday, I hope the mayor asks him the question why he quashed regulatory rules that would have prevented or may have prevented this train from derailing in the first place. I think every Republican from the Congress who is out there complaining about Biden going to Europe should say why they opposed those rules when they went to the Congress, because this is why the accident happened to begin with. Less regulation on the railway, less regulation of chemical industry. These are things that should be addressed by everybody out there who are out there squawking about the president doing something historic, being the first president to go to a war zone not controlled by U.S. troops. I think it's an amazing thing. I think it sends a statement to the world, and I think the president can walk and chew gum at the same time.
President Biden, again, making very rare and unprecedented moves to go to Ukraine. But Eric, I saw you shaking your head there. Does former President Trump bear any responsibility?
I think it's funny. It's always easy to pick. And this is something that happens in our country for the last 8 years. It's fun to pick a side instead of looking at the city of the American people, where this is great. And it's great that the president could choose to go do something amazing, like going to the Ukraine when it's not wartime and our troops aren't there. And somehow Ukraine has become the focal point of our country. But East Palestine had a tragedy, and it's Norfolk, the people who decided to light and infuse this chemical on fire, that are to blame. We could go back and look at politicians and presidents that we elect every 4 years and blame whoever, but this is the railroad not doing their job and putting Americans in danger. And the fact that 0 people from the Biden administration have even bothered to show up, and then you have governors and the EPA telling the American people that they're sitting here going, hey, you could drink the water. Why don't we see them drink this water when we're seeing people, bipartisan, going and looking in the rivers and finding chemicals there? And why are we having reporters arrested for reporting this? Why has this been so hush-hush since February 3rd?
Chris, I want to give you a chance to respond before we leave.
Yeah, I mean, the EPA administrator appointed by President Biden has been to East Palestine several times since this crisis began. In fact, the EPA was on the scene almost immediately after the derailment, testing the air and testing the water. So the Biden administration has been responding, along with the state of Ohio, along with others. And I think it's, disingenuous to say that the president can't do two things at once. The president of the United States needs to deal with multiple crises at any given time. There is an international crisis that is going on in Europe right now that the president is addressing. He also has his team on the ground in East Palestine. And yes, I think the president should make a trip to East Palestine. I agree with that. And I agree, we are all Americans and we should take this very seriously. And I think President Biden and his administration are. And I think they could do two things at once.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.